So, um, first, I guess would be one of the more advanced objections. Is there any like extra biblical corroborative evidence? If not, why may not there be? So do like how can we verify, or is there anything else like other documents that verify it?
Where we can know outside of the Bible that really no one doubted the existence of Jesus. That wasn't present as a counter theory. None of that, but even someone like Celsus, Origen wrote against most, said that Jesus did miracles by ideas he learned from the Egyptians. He learned magic from them. They weren't even disputing that he did miracles in
Right.
that case. Tertullian spoke about Jesus being crucified under Pontius Pilate, and then that a mischievous superstition arose after that. Uh, the thing that we have to remember is a lot of people get this idea, they say, well, why wasn't everyone talking about Jesus? He was such a great figure. And my response from you, I'm not surprised that so few people wrote about Jesus outside of the Gospels and Scripture. I'm surprised anyone wrote about him at all. Because for us, Jesus is the most monumental figure of all, but in the ancient world, it hadn't reached that point yet. Jesus was to them seen as a nobody. He never traveled. Aside from his sojourn as an infant, he never traveled outside of his homeland. He never wrote a book, never ran for office. He didn't build a school of any kind. He wasn't a military figure, and he died by crucifixion. None of those would be worth talking about. And say where he had claims of doing miracles, yes, that's exactly what the Roman historians would say. Claims. That's it. They wouldn't take it seriously. I use a parallel. Say, imagine a scenario where, say, 100 years from now, all of America turns Mormon. We are the first Mormon country. And a historian decides, I want to go back and see what people said about Joseph Smith at the time of his life before he discovered the Mormon plates.
Right.
They're not going to find as much. They're not going to find people saying, oh, Joseph Smith was the most awesome person of all. They'll find quite the opposite, actually.
Yeah.
But at a future time, if this happened, everyone would be thinking Joseph Smith was like the greatest person who ever lived.
Right.
And then they look back like, well, people didn't think that then. In a similar way, Jesus, today we see him as a monumental, extraordinary figure, but in the ancient world, no, he was just seen as some rabble-rouser who came from a backwater area of the world, and no one should pay attention to him because he died by crucifixion, which is not worth talking about.
Right, and of course, crucified victims. I mean, it's seen on churches now, but I mean, back then it was pretty much the worst thing that could happen to somebody. It was viewed that way, and also people in general just didn't want to talk about it, especially since it was so shameful, right?
Yeah, it was for Bruno of the ancient world.
Ah, I see, and plus, also, I think we and I think a lot of people also may not consider that. First, a lot of people didn't know how to read and write back then.
Right.
Correct? Yeah.
Right.
So I mean, there wouldn't have been nearly as many people to actually be able to do it. And isn't it also true that in many cases, much of ancient literature hasn't been preserved because there weren't enough people to copy it?
Yeah, first, what I have to remember is that event happens, someone has to write down the event. that writing has to last long enough to be recopied.
Right.
And then those copies have to last long enough to reach down to us. We've lost a lot from the ancient world.
Yeah, that's a good point too. And I mean, in general, of course, writing was much harder back then too, right? Because
Yeah. I'm wanting to read a book soon called The Gutenberg Galaxy. I haven't got around to it yet. But the idea is that when Gutenberg came, he changed the way we think about everything. So today people can say, well, geez, if this was so important, why didn't they just write it down immediately? Why do we think that way? Because we've lived in a literary culture
right.
where writing is the main thing. Now we're moving into, instead, a digital culture. So you can imagine 100 years from now, people will hear about events in World War II, and the younger ones will ask, well, what were they saying about it on the internet? Because that's going to be the way they naturally think about things.
True.
And so what's going on is that in the ancient world, they were an oral culture.
Right.
And news spread best by word of mouth in communities. So, you live in the time of Jesus, you're wanting to get the message out about who he is and what he's done. You have two ways you can do it. One is free, it's quick, easily done, and can reach anyone who can speak the language.
Right.
The other is extremely costly. I mean, I read a book about a decade ago saying just writing a letter like Galatians would have cost $500 at the time. Who knows how much it costs now? It's extremely slow. Whereas writing, you have to get the ink, the query, everything. You have to get all the materials together, and it will only reach people who can read or hear the story being read. Now, which one of those are you going to go with? You're going to go with the oral communication for the most part. Eventually, it was written down because they did want a record of it, but oral communication just worked a whole lot better back then. And we need to stop putting our bias of Gutenberg onto the ancient world.
No, definitely, and that's a good point. And that's if you didn't make a mistake in your writing too.
Right.
Can you imagine? I mean, I imagine there were people who made a mistake and they might have had to either skip something or start all over in some cases, and that would have.
And this is also a benefit when it comes to the New Testament, because we have more documents of the New Testament closer to the time than we do any of our ancient texts at all. I mean, if you can't trust that the text of the New Testament handed down in a sense that's at least generally reliable, you really can't trust any of our ancient documents.
Yeah, definitely. But of course, I'd imagine few people question other ancient sources in that way, or their reliability, or at least not compared to how many people question the New Testament.
Now, if the New Testament didn't have miraculous, strong claims that it had, it would be accepted as the most reliable ancient document we have.
Fair enough, definitely.